Right then, here we are back in the wonderful world of War Thunder, where today we'll be looking at the first of the British Reserve vehicles, the cruiser Mark IV A13 Mark I. As usual, I'll be covering the history and technical details first. If you wish to skip all that and go straight to the battle, go click that timecode in the description. For those interested in interesting things, sit tight, buckle up and prepare to launch into the history of the A13 Mark I.
Oh man, I've been looking forward to this all week.
To begin this story, we need to go way back to the First World War, where the first tanks, the Mark I's, were proving themselves as viable weapons of warfare at the Battle of the Somme in September 1916. William Triton, who was directly involved with the development of the first tanks, noticed that while the Mark I was very good at blasting a hole through the German trenches, it was not particularly effective at exploiting this. The Mark I was simply too slow to take on the role that had until before the First World War been filled by cavalry. And so, William Triton suggested to the Tank Supply Committee that a smaller, faster tank be built to act as a cavalry tank, and exploit the gaps created by the heavy tanks. The committee accepted the idea and passed it on to the War Office, who approved it on the 25th of November. Thus, the medium tank Mark A Whippet was born. The initial prototype of the Whippet had a revolving turret taken from an Austin armoured car, and would have been the first tank in the world with such a feature, but the production version had a fixed superstructure with a bunch of machine guns sticking out, and so the French FT-17 got to claim this title. The Whippets were first delivered to frontline units in March 1918 and proved useful in covering the Allies' retreat from the German Spring Offensive. Although the Whippet was very successful, the type suffered heavy losses to the extent that by the end of the war only the 3rd Tank Brigade still operated the type. But even so, the Whippet had proven the concept of the cavalry tank. For example, on one occasion during the Amiens offensive on the 8th of August 1918, a single Whippet named Musical Box broke through the German lines and spent the next 9 hours driving around blowing up anything it came across, including an infantry battalion encampment, an observation balloon, an artillery battery, and a supply column. Next came the medium Mark B, also called Whippet. Although this vehicle introduced some pioneering features, such as sloping armour and the ability to deploy a smokescreen, as well as having the engine at the back in a separate compartment in order not to kill the vehicle's crew with carbon monoxide, the Mark B was unpopular, and so only 45 were delivered. The reasons for this were that because the engine was in a separate compartment, it could not be repaired from inside the tank, and because the rival medium Mark C was slightly better. The Mark C was longer than the Mark B, giving it better trench crossing ability, and although the engine was in its own compartment separate from the fighting compartment, just like the Mark B, it was accessible from inside the tank, meaning that the crew could conduct minor repairs without having to exit the vehicle and exposing themselves to enemy fire. In addition, the Mark C featured ventilation fans, speaking tubes, and, like the Mark B, could inject sulfonic acid into the exhaust system to generate a smokescreen. Although the Mark C was delivered too late to see the end of World War I, a small number were used in Glasgow in 1919 to pacify rioters during the Battle of George Square. After the First World War, Britain entered a period of experimentation with regards to armoured fighting vehicles, developing vehicles such as the Carden-Loyd Tankette and the first British tank to feature a revolving turret, the Vickers Medium. By the 1930s, it was decided that tank development should focus on 3 distinctive types of tanks. Light tanks, which would be useful for scouting and reconnaissance as well as for colonial policing duties, infantry tanks, which would support the infantry going no faster than walking pace and featuring heavy armour, and the cruiser tank, which would exploit breakthroughs, pursue retreating enemies, and generally operate in the same manner as the cavalry did before the Great War. The first of the cruiser tanks was the tank cruiser Mark I A9. This vehicle originated from a requirement to make the replacement for the Vickers Medium Mark II, the Vickers Medium Mark III, cheaper, due to restrictions to the economy and thus the War Office's budget imposed as a result of the Great Depression. The cruiser Mark I featured a power-operated, centrally mounted primary turret, the first of its kind on a British tank, as well as 2 machine-gun-armed secondary turrets on either side of the driver. It was armed with a QF 2-pounder, was protected at most by 14mm of armour, and powered by a 150 horsepower AEC 179 6-cylinder petrol engine, the same as that used by the London bus, which propelled the A9 to a top speed of 25 miles per hour, or 40 kilometers per hour. The cruiser tank Mark I saw some success in France, Greece and North Africa, the 2-pounder being particularly effective against the Italian and early German tanks. But the vehicles suffered from mechanical unreliability and from possessing very thin armour. Next came the tank cruiser Mark II, A10, which was developed in parallel with the A9 and was intended to be an infantry tank version of that vehicle. For this reason, the A10 featured up to 1 inch or 25mm of armour, as opposed to the A9's 14, and the 2 secondary turrets were deleted, being replaced by a single hull-mounted machine gun. In addition, 15mm of applique armour was bolted onto the hull front and sides, as well as on all sides of the turret. Although this brought the effective thickness of the A10's armour up to 30mm, it also increased the vehicle's weight to 14 tons, 2 more than that of the A9. This meant that, because the A10 used the same engine as its counterpart, the top speed was reduced to 16 miles per hour, or 26 kilometers per hour. The cruiser tank Mark II saw combat during the Battle of France and in North Africa, alongside the Mark I, and, like its counterpart, was able to deal with most opposition with its 2-pounder gun. However, because it was 2 tons heavier than the A9 but used the same engine, transmission and suspension, cross-country performance was relatively poor. Despite this, the cruiser Mark II was praised for its mechanical reliability in comparison with the other British cruisers. In addition, a support variant designated the cruiser Mark II-A CS featured a 3.7-inch howitzer in place of the 2-pounder, intended to support infantry with smoke and high explosive cover. Which brings us finally onto the subject of today's video. I know I've already used up 5.5 pages of A4 to get us here, but we wouldn't want us to miss out on any of the fascinating backstory of this vehicle, now would we? Anyway, as prototypes of the A9 and A10 tanks were being delivered, the Assistant Director of Mechanization at the War Office, General Giffard Lequesne Martel, who had pioneered the idea of the tankette, saw a demonstration of Soviet BT tanks in 1936. The high speeds attainable through the Soviet tanks' utilization of the Christie suspension system, which utilized bell cranks and large road wheels and other such gubbins, impressed General Martel to such an extent that when he returned to Blighty, he proposed that the Christie suspension be studied and utilized for British tanks. The British government went ahead and purchased a T3 Christie tank from America, and after this example had been taken apart and studied, a production license. Christie's design was extensively modified, becoming larger. Nuffield Mechanization and Aero Limited was created specifically for the development and production of this new tank. It was to be armed by a 2-pounder gun, be armoured by 30mm of armour, and be able to reach speeds of up to 30 miles per hour. This last requirement dictated the use of a modified aircraft engine, another feature suggested by General Martel, and present in the Christie design in the form of a Liberty engine. For this reason, the Nuffield Company began license producing the 340 horsepower Liberty L12 12-cylinder petrol engine under the name Nuffield Liberty. The turret was taken from the A9/A10 cruisers with a modified cupola. The first production cruiser Mark IIIs were delivered in December 1938. However, work had already started on an improved version to address several problems identified in the Mark III, such as the armour being too thin and the unreliability of the Nuffield Liberty. The improved version was called the Tank Cruiser Mark IV A13 Mark II, which we also have in War Thunder. The Mark III cruiser was issued to the 1st Armoured Division, who went over to France as part of the British Expeditionary Force in May 1940. All of these were lost, those not destroyed by German guns being abandoned during the evacuation at Dunkirk. A CS version with 3.7-inch howitzer was also developed, but these met with a similar fate in France. Like the A9 and A10s, the A13's 2-pounder was effective against most opposition. However, its thin armour and crippling unreliability meant that the type suffered very heavy losses. Now, I'm sure that many of you are looking at your A13 Mark I in your little garages in War Thunder and thinking, "Hey, it says here that this is a Mark IV cruiser. Why are you telling us about the Mark III when the one we've got is the Mark IV? Well, the reason for that is that Gaijin got it wrong! We do have a cruiser Mark IV, but that is under the designation of A13 Mark II. Gaijin is correct in stating that the subject of today's video is an A13 Mark I, but it is incorrect in stating that it is a cruiser Mark IV. It's not. It's a Mark III. Fix yo shit, Gaijin. Anyway, speaking of Gaijin, let's take a little look at the tank cruiser Mark III, A13 Mark I in War Thunder.
Okay, so Mark III, please don't hurt me.
Right, so here we have the cruiser Mark III A13 Mark I here in the garage. Look at it there, isn't it wonderful? Now, I did say that this is a Mark III A13. The reason for that is because it says here that it's a Mark IV A13. Well, that is incorrect. It's not. It's a Mark III. Cruiser Mark III, that is. Right, first things first, you got the crew. Let's take a little look here. Here they are. They're all bunched up nicely. Packed like sardines, they is. Right, so you got the gunner who sits here on the left-hand side. You got the commander behind him, looking through the little cupola, and you got the loader who sits on that side. And down here in the front, in the middle, you got the driver. He sits in his own little box here at the front. Now, this thing here. You see this thing, little slot thing here? That's the gun sight. So if you're using the realistic location for the gun sight, like I do, because I'm a professional, don't you know, you got to take that into account. If you're poking beside a wall and the wall is here, and you think, oh, I can see past the wall because the gun sight's past the wall, well, the gun might not be past the wall. So take that into account. And behind them, you've got the radio. The British like to put the radios in the turret. And I suppose that's a relatively good place to put it. It means the commander can access it easily. He's not got anything else to do up there, apart from command the tank. And he's got to use the radio, so why not have him fiddle with it? Right, you got the main gunner here, the 40mm QF 2-pounder. More on that later. And next to it you've got the coaxial machine gun, which is a Vickers machine gun. I think it's a Vickers E. It's water-cooled at any rate. Might not be a Vickers E actually, that's the aircraft one. Around them you've got the turret ring. It gets damaged, like everything in this tank, very easily. And here, around here, all stuck all over the place, you've got ammunition. Got ammunition everywhere. More on that later as well. Here in the back you've got the Nuffield Liberty engine, V12, petrol, 340 horsepower. Beside it you've got two radiators, they can catch fire occasionally. This engine is very good in War Thunder. It's pretty powerful. Makes this tank very quick. And behind it, in the back, you've got the transmission. The proper place to put the transmission, so that it's not sticking all the way down through the front, where it might get easily damaged and catch fire. Also in the back, you've got the fuel tanks. A very sensible place to put them, I think, low down in the back. You don't have friggin' fuel tanks all over the place, you know, up here in the front, or under the floor. There's silly places to put it. You put them in the back, where they're supposed to be, so that if they catch fire, you know, they're not burning all up the inside where all the people are. Yeah. Anyway, there you go. That's pretty standard layout. It's a layout that the British tend to follow for the rest of the war, more or less. You got all the stuff to do with the engine in the back. You got the stuff to do with the shooting and the fighting in the middle, and the driving at the front. It's a system that works well. I don't see why you would deviate from that, really. Now, the gun. It is a QF 2-pounder, as I said before. It's a very good gun, very quick firing. Well, QF stands for quick fire. It fires quickly. It's in the name. It's very high penetration as well. Trouble is, the ammunition you get doesn't really do all that much damage. Let's see what you got here. You got the Shot Mark 1 AP/T. That's pretty much all you'll ever need. You get 80mm of penetration at 10 meters, 21 at 2000 meters. That will pretty much be enough to deal with anything you encounter. You might have a little bit of trouble with French tanks at long range, however, in which case you should change to the Shot Mark 1 APCBC/T. The T stands for Tracer, by the way. Where it has 43mm of penetration at 2000 meters. So it's slightly better at longer range, but at close range you want to use this shell. They both have pretty much the same damaging effect, I found. Maybe a little bit more spalling with this one, but nothing really all that noticeable. You also get the smoke grenades. You get 2 smoke grenades. Here they are stuck on the side. They pretty much fire both at the same time, so you get 1 smoke screen that you can deploy. It goes up and then down, land rather randomly somewhere out here in the front. So, you know, it's not really a screen, more as it is a splodge. You get a smoke splodge. You get a tin helmet there, and that's a little bit more armor, so to speak. Secondary weapons, like I said, you've got the Vickers machine gun here. It's a fairly good machine gun. You do get 3,500 rounds for that in, I think, 250 round belts of ammunition. So, yeah, it's like similar to most early war machine guns. They have long belts. This one in particular is wood core. Pretty low rate of fire, but you don't really need to worry about that, do you? I should have said earlier, for the 2 pounder you get 87 rounds of ammunition. Look at all them all there, they're spread out all over the place. I would recommend, like the T26 that we saw in the other tank video that we did earlier, carrying at the most around 30 rounds of ammunition. So, you know, 20 of these, 10 of these maybe, or 25 of these, 5 of these. It's up to you really, but either way you don't really need more than 30, because if you've survived long enough to shoot all 30 of your rounds, you probably have taken a couple of capture points, at which time you'll have reloaded. You get artillery support on this one, however you do not get the new spotting mechanic. This is a light tank, but it is also a cruiser tank. So it's a battle tank, you know. You shoot at the enemy, you don't spot them. Armor-wise, it is rather dismal, really. Here, the gun mantlet, that's usually the most armoured part of the tank. It's 14mm thick. The rest of the tank is all 14mm thick. All around. All around on the turret, even the roof, all around on the hull. You might think, oh, the sides are only 7mm thick. Actually, they're not. Look closely. It's spaced armour. It's another 7mm underneath there. That's because down here, in between the 2 spaced armours, bits of spaced armour, is the Christie suspension. There it is there, see, look. And you can also tell that by the large wheels. So, yeah, they move up and down a lot. That's also why there's such a big space between the mudguards and the tracks there. Because they've got to go up and down. Christie suspension does that. But anyway, yeah, 14mm of armour, literally all around. You do get the occasional bit of it doubling up, such as the occasional bit up here. You get 2 layers of 14mm of armour. And here on the front you get an additional 10mm. You get 4 little bits of armoured boxes here and there. Metal boxes, as they say. Bits of metal gubbins. They might help occasionally with the armour, but don't count on the armour for this thing. It'll stop a rifle caliber machine gun bullet. It won't stop much else, maybe a 50 cal at long range. Any sort of anti-tank weapon will go straight through this thing. At any sort of range, really. So, yeah, rely on your speed. Speaking of speed, Mobility-wise, the A13 does very well, as you might expect. It is indeed a cruiser tank, and it is an improved cruiser tank, unlike those A9s or those A10s. This thing can actually cruise. Top speed is around 29 miles per hour. Historically, it was supposed to be able to do 30, but for some reason War Thunder is capped out at 29. And you can achieve this sort of speed on level ground, which is nice. There's a Panzer II over there. I think we should shoot at it a little bit. 2-pounder gun can pretty much deal with anything you're likely to encounter at this sort of level. See, there's a Panzer II, which is generally one of the more armoured, pardon me, of the low-tier tanks, and it'll go straight through it. Don't even need to load the slightly better ammunition. The stock ammunition, that is. Turning-wise, it generally turns pretty well, but for some reason the A13 has an awkward feature whereby when you stop turning, it'll keep turning for a little bit by itself. For example, look, I'm turning, I've stopped turning, it keeps turning for a bit. That's something you need to get used to. You can get used to it after a little while, but it might catch the unsuspecting player unawares. Neutral turning is pretty slow, as with most vehicles. Yeah. Maybe get it in gear before starting your turn. I'm going to show you this whole process just so it hammers it home. Look how slow it turns. And there we have a revolution. Let's get out into the field. Some nice space so we can do these turning tests a little better. Here we're in 5th gear, we're going to turn. Turns very quickly in 5th gear, even when it's reduced to 3rd gear. And now 2nd. So yeah, get it in gear before starting your turn. And now driving turn, it's pretty much the same as doing the brake turning. That's what I'm calling the other system, brake turning. Reverse, it doesn't turn particularly well, mainly because the reverse speed of it is pretty poor, as with most British tanks, because they see no need to go in reverse. It's not like they'll ever retreat from anything. Dunkirk. Pardon me. So yeah, they see the reverse speed -3 miles per hour. That's about 4 or 5 kilometers per hour. Forward speed, that's 29 miles per hour. About 35 kilometers per hour, maybe. I mean, you saw the history part. You should have done, at least. And if you did, then you would know how fast that is in kilometers per hour. Turret turning speed, it is a power-operated turret, one of the first tanks to have one. Even so, it turns pretty slowly. There, it turns that quick. That's pretty slow. I mean, it's about average for this sort of tier, but there are tanks with turrets that turn a lot faster, such as the Sherman. And things like that. And there we go. Elevation and depression, well, let's set the gun down, all the way down. There is this funny block thing in front of the gun. I'm not really sure what that is for, I couldn't find anything about it. But it does prevent the gun from going any further. But then the breech is almost at the ceiling, so I suppose that's fair enough. It is well, it's very good gun depression actually. Very good indeed. Gun elevation, and also gun elevation speed. The gun goes up and down average for this sort of tier. The good thing about this gun is it does have it is semi-stabilized. So, you know, when you come to a sudden stop, or when you're going in reverse, the gun should remain on target. The way this happened, the way this was that the gunner would put his shoulder into this funny pad thing on the back of the gun. It's manually elevated. There's no little cranky, turny, cranky worm thing there. You gotta elevate it with your shoulder, which means that you can sort of keep it on target while driving around on the bumpy ground. There's gun elevation, sticking it up in the air. It's pretty good. And now let's bring the gun back down. I can't show you the smoke grenade launchers because for some reason it doesn't let me do that in the test drive mode. But no matter. To kill an A13 Mark 1 from the front, pretty much just shoot it right here in the middle. If you look, armour, it's 14mm just like everywhere else. But behind it you got the driver. And behind him you've got everyone else. They're all bunched up nicely, so if you've got high explosive armor-piercing high explosive shells, such as those that you get with the Germans and the Russians, then it'll go in here, it'll decapitate this guy, and it'll explode somewhere around here, among the knees of everyone in here. They'll get very violently castrated. It'll be very, very brutal. From the side, pretty much just shoot it here. Underneath, or in the side of the turret, I guess. But I think you'll have more luck if you shoot it around about here on the side underneath the turret. Because if you look here, it's mostly empty space. Yeah, actually, yeah, shooting the side of the turret. Because if you kill 3 people, then the fourth one hasn't got much of a choice but to get out. I mean, you might get lucky and set one of the ammunition blocks on fire, but they are quite small. So, yeah, shoot it in the side of the turret. From the side. From the rear, yeah. This radio can stop a bullet if it's not a very big one. So, for example, if you're using a 50 caliber machine gun, it might get stuck in this here radio. Although, it's probably likely that anything you shoot at the back will go through, kill all 3 in the turret. But if you're not entirely comfortable with it, you can shoot it in the engine. The turret turns pretty quickly, but not really quickly enough for you to turn before you reload your gun, and you shoot it again in the turret this time. This time you'll have the side of the turret. So there you go. He'll probably deploy smoke if he's got it unlocked, but it's a very thin spread with this smoke grenade launcher, as I said. You probably don't need to worry about that much. Right, I think it's high time we had a little battle, don't you think? Well, I think so, and I'm in charge, so meh.
Hey, it's that time of night again.
So the first attempt at getting footage for this, nothing really happened. I didn't see a single enemy tank. I was always too late to any of the action. I'd arrive and everything would already be dead. I was always in the wrong place. I fire off my smoke grenades just to show you what they look like. There, this bunch of smoke. Let's drive into it. Won't that be cinematic? Second battle, I do manage to get a kill. I kill a French tank there, go straight through the front. Like I said, the 2-pounder is very good at this sort of level. Now I hear another enemy shooting around somewhere in this capture point, and he's just around this corner. However, I make a silly mistake. I think his turret will be pointing the other way, but it's not, and I donk the shot. It bounces off the side of the BT, and he blows me up in one. Here you can see just how dangerous, especially Russian tanks are with their explosive shells. Yes. Final attempt, third attempt, I'm stalking this BT tank and I shoot him in the back. You would think easy kill, yeah? Well, this shows the problems with the 2-pounder shells. They have no explosive filler. I just fired 4 shots into the back of a BT And then it didn't kill him because they just don't do enough damage, and he turns the turret round, shoots me in one because his shells kaplode. I suppose I'm just not a very good shot, I guess. Well, you know what they say, fourth time's the charm, hee hee hee. Anyway, here we are in Poland, in the dusk. You can see what ammunition I've got. I've got 25 of the APCBC shells and 5 of the regular ones. I should really have those the other way around, but there you go. The APCBCs aren't really that expensive on this tank. So, first things first, switch the gun sight to nighttime mode, so you can actually see where you're shooting. And I head off towards A. Because, you know, most of the people go towards A, and I think, well, this time I want to actually meet some people and maybe shoot them in the face instead of being where everyone isn't. Because that was rather boring. Looking through the binoculars and driving through the craters, looking through the binoculars again, making sure nobody's scooting across that field. Sometimes they do that to get up to the D5 sort of area and make their way through the forest. A little French tank scuttling along next to me, and make it into the buildings. I like to get a little bit lost inside the buildings, do some urban combat and such. Now, looking through the binoculars down at the gap where enemy tanks sometimes drive down. Doesn't appear to be anyone down there, so I'm moving up to the buildings up ahead, nearer to A. French tanks got themselves stuck in a crater. Drive through a fence. And I think I can see... Yes, there's muzzle flash. I fire and it's a BT. And it goes through and it kills the driver. And it won't have moved, so I fire again. And that kills the gunner. Luckily there's only 2 people in a BT. Well, 3. And killing 2 of them will kill it. And there's another guy through there. I fire my machine gun at it, so I know he's there, because you can see the tracer ammunition bouncing off. And I shoot him again, and now he's dead. On fire and such. Looking through the binoculars again, past the house. Don't really want to move into the capture point at this time, because there's bound to be more people around there, and also artillery is turning that place into hell and such. So, looking through the gaps in between the buildings, and no, can't see anything. I think about moving up, taking a look around at the sides, make sure no BTs are flanked, and then all of a sudden, oh, it's a truck! He's gonna come round that building, I'm pretty sure, but I'll make sure he doesn't double back, and there he is again! Unfortunately, I see him too late to start opening fire. And I'm pretty sure he's gonna come round that side of the building, but then all of a sudden we're attacked from behind! It's a BT! He's flanked us! He kills my little French friend! Look! Oh no! But luckily, I shoot him in the engine. But then he gets off the next shot. I know he's going to be able to fire before me, so I pop off a bit of smoke. And that actually does save me. He sets me on fire, but I don't put it out because I want to get the gun reloaded, and I manage to shoot into his fighting compartment. But then, oh no, we're being attacked from behind, so I drop some artillery down on that position. I'm pretty sure I'm screwed at this point, but luckily another one of my little French friends, they come to the rescue and they kill that BT that was on the other side, and the turret turns very slowly. 45-second repair time, and I'm pretty sure I'm doomed at this point. I see another one there, but the shot goes a little bit wild because I couldn't really see him through the artillery barrage. I still can't see anything. I'm stuck out here in the open. I've got no smoke grenades left. You only get 2 and oh no, it's a BT! And my shot goes wide! The whole gun sight being offset catches me off guard. And I shoot again, but the same problem occurs. And then I'm killed by a truck with a machine gun glued to it. And you can see just how thin the armour is. A 50 caliber machine gun bullet goes in through 2 layers of armour, bounces off the front plate, and kills the gunner. The rest of the match I spend flying around in a swordfish, which was kind of fun. There's an I-15 buzzing about. I don't really think that guy knew what he was doing, because I managed to get on his tail somehow and shoot at him. I didn't shoot him down, but I scared him off. I didn't see him again for the rest of the match. There you see, I'm shooting at him with my machine gun. Yeah. Take that, Ivan. And then, yeah, my tail gunner has a big pop at him. And then he buzzes off. Well, I do shoot him a couple more times. He's not attacking for some reason. He must have been out of ammunition, maybe. I mean, now I finally go for my bombing run, now that I-15 has flown away. I see something down in those houses approaching the big field that leads on to the spawn points. Can't really see what it is, but the French pilot lights them up. I get some tracer firing in my direction. I will avoid it. And I drop my bombs. There they go. And it's a hit. It's a T-26. So, yeah. Could probably have sneezed on it and it would have blown up, but no matter, it's a kill. But then the enemy anti-aircraft fire starts getting pretty accurate. I'll take a few shots at an I-15, but yeah, I got to avoid the flak coming up from the B position. I think they must have a truck down there. So yeah, making some flying about a bit. They have hit my oil tank or oil reservoir, but luckily I make it back to base and put it down, come to a nice graceful stop, fill up with more bombs and repair the plane, take off again. Here we go, back for another crack at shooting, bombing, doing whatever you do in an aeroplane. But unfortunately, oh no, there's another I-15, and also there's a hell of a lot of fire coming up from the ground around our spawn points. It's swarming with enemy tanks. But yeah, there's an I-15 approaching, so I dive down close to the ground. He follows and starts shooting at me, but I have a cunning plan. I drop my bombs, and they're set to 2 seconds, and they work! They blow him up! Oh, aren't I so fantastically clever? But unfortunately, then we lose. And so there you have it. The tank, the cruiser tank, Mark III, A13 Mark I. It's an okay sort of tank. It's not really great at anything, but there are tanks that are worse than that at most things. You get smoke grenade launchers, they're always nice. You get a very good gun. Mobility's good. There are tanks with better mobility at this sort of tier. The armor's dreadful, but there are tanks with worse armor at this sort of level. It's an okay sort of tank. A little bit boring, but yeah, it's okay. You get some kills, you might die. Anyway, so hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully we'll see you for the next one, where we'll be looking at the swordfish. I know we saw a little bit of it today. That was just a teaser. We're gonna get the full issue next time. So hopefully you'll join us for that one. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.